The sky was burning. Queen Velith stood at the great window of her palace and watched her world die. Ships fell from the heavens like broken stars. Fire spread across the ancient cities that her people had built over 10,000 years. The screams of millions filled her mind. And she could do nothing to stop them. The Hollow had come. For centuries, the Sarati Empire had heard stories about them. A species with no soul, no mind, no thoughts that could be touched or controlled. They moved across the galaxy like a dark wave, eating everything in their path. Planets, people, entire civilizations all gone. All consumed, the Sarati had believed they were safe. Their psychic powers were the strongest in the known universe. They could read minds, control thoughts, and break the will of any enemy. No species had ever defeated them in war. No species had ever dared to try. But the Hollow were different. They had no minds to read, no will to break. They were empty vessels, filled only with hunger. That hunger could not be stopped by thought alone. Velith pressed her hand against the cold glass. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived people. She had ruled for 300 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched stars die, but she had never felt fear like this. Behind her, the doors opened. Her advisor, Keth, walked in quickly, his silver robes flowing behind him. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with panic. "My queen," he said, "the outer fleet is gone. The orbital stations have fallen. They will reach the surface within hours." Velith did not turn around. "And our allies?" Keth was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was bitter. "They have abandoned us. The Ven claim their ships cannot arrive in time. The Torax say this is not their war. The Council has declared our system a quarantine zone. No one is coming." Velith closed her eyes. Of course, the other species had always feared the Sarati. They had smiled and traded and signed treaties, but deep inside they had waited for this day. The day when the great Sarati Empire would finally fall. "Then we will die alone," Velith said quietly. "Not alone, my queen?" Velith turned to look at Keth. His expression had changed. There was something strange in his eyes, confusion mixed with a small spark of hope. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Ship has answered our distress call. A small vessel. They are requesting permission to land." "Who?" Keth hesitated. "Humans." The word hung in the air between them. Humans. The youngest species in the Galactic Council. They had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. They were small, weak, and short-lived. Their bodies broke easily. Their minds were closed to psychic touch. Not because they were strong, but because they were simply too chaotic to read clearly. The other species called them many things: primitive, reckless, dangerous, emotional. The Sarati had never paid much attention to them. They were like children playing in a garden of giants. Interesting, perhaps, but not important. "Humans," Velith repeated. "What can humans do against the Hollow?" "I do not know, my queen, but they are the only ones who came." Velith looked back at the burning sky. Her people were dying. Her empire was crumbling. And the only hand reaching out to help belonged to the species everyone considered the weakest in the galaxy. She had no choice. "Let them land," she said. The human ship arrived 1 hour later. It was small, barely larger than a transport vessel. Its hull was covered in scars and burn marks from old battles. On its side, painted in white letters, was a name: the Perseverance. Velith watched from her throne room as the humans walked through the palace gates. There were only 12 of them. 12 soldiers in heavy armor, carrying weapons that looked crude compared to Sarati technology. They moved in a tight formation, their eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The Sarati guards looked down at them with open disdain. These creatures were supposed to save them. These soft, fragile beings who lived for less than a century. It was almost insulting, but Velith noticed something else, something the guards did not see. The humans walked without fear. The palace was falling apart around them. Explosions shook the walls. The sky was filled with enemy ships. And yet these 12 soldiers walked forward like they were taking a stroll through a garden. Their faces were calm. Their hands were steady. They did not run. They did not hesitate. The leader stepped forward. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that had seen many battles. His armor was scratched and dented, marked by years of war. When he spoke, his voice was deep and steady. "I am Commander Tai Wu of the Earth Defense Corps. We received your distress call. We are here to help." Velith studied him carefully. She tried to touch his mind, to read his thoughts, but all she found was noise. A storm of emotions so wild and tangled that she could not make sense of it. Fear was there, yes, but it was buried under something else. Something hot and bright that she could not name. "You are only 12, Velith said. The hollow number in the millions. What can 12 humans do?" Tai Wu did not smile. He did not look away. "We can fight." Keth stepped forward, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Fight? This is madness. You will die in minutes. Your weapons are primitive. Your bodies are weak. You have no psychic abilities. What makes you think you can stand against the Hollow?" One of the other humans laughed softly. He was a scarred man with cold eyes, standing at Tai Wu's right side. His name tag read Doan. There was something dangerous about him, something that made even the Sarati guards step back without knowing why. "We have been fighting since the day we were born," Doan said. "Fighting the land. Fighting the weather. Fighting each other. Fighting things bigger and stronger than us." He looked directly at Keth. "We are still here. They are not." Silence filled the throne room. Velith felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. It was hope. Small and fragile, but real. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you come? We have shown your people no kindness. The council ignores you. The other species mock you. Why would you risk your lives for strangers who never cared about you?" Tai Wu looked at her for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was quiet but firm, "'Cause someone has to." Outside, the Hollow broke through another defense line. The screams in Velith's mind grew louder. Time was running out. Her people needed to evacuate. They needed to escape before the planet was completely lost. But first, someone had to hold the line. Tai Wu turned to his soldiers. "Set up defensive positions at the main gates. Protect the evacuation routes. No one gets through." The humans moved without hesitation, spreading out through the palace like they had done this 1,000 times before. They checked their weapons, marked their positions, and prepared for war. Velith watched them go. These strange, short-lived creatures who had crossed the stars to die for people they had never met. She did not understand them, but for the first time since, the Hollow arrived. She believed they might survive. The palace had stood for 8,000 years. Its walls were made from white stone that glowed softly in the light of 2 moons. Its towers reached toward the sky like fingers touching the stars. Generations of Sarati had walked its halls, dreaming of a future that would last forever. Now it was a fortress, and 12 humans were preparing to defend it. Doan walked through the eastern corridor, his eyes moving from window to window. He counted the entry points. He measured the distances. He looked for places where the enemy could break through, and places where his team could fall back. His mind worked like a machine, cold and precise. Behind him walked Yuna. She was smaller than the other soldiers, but her hands moved with the same steady confidence. She carried a medical kit on her back and a rifle on her shoulder. Her job was to keep people alive, but she had killed enough enemies to know that sometimes saving lives meant taking them first. "The eastern wall is weak," Doan said without turning around. "Old stone. Too many windows. They will hit us here first. Then we hold here first," Yuna replied. They reached a large hall filled with Sarati civilians. Hundreds of them sat on the floor, their silver eyes wide with terror. Children clung to their parents. Elders stared at nothing, their minds filled with the screams of the dying. The Sarati were not used to this kind of fear. Their psychic powers had always protected them. They could sense danger before it arrived. They could calm their emotions with a thought. They could share their feelings with others, spread spreading peace through their entire society. But the hollow had broken something inside them. The psychic network that connected all Serati was flooded with pain and terror. Every death added to the noise. Every scream made it louder. They could not shut it out. They could not think clearly. They were drowning in the suffering of their own people. A young Serati female approached Yuna. Her name was Mireille, and she was one of the palace healers. Her hands were shaking and her face was wet with tears. "How can you be so calm?" Mireille asked. "I can feel the death all around us. Millions are dying. The whole planet is screaming. How do you not hear it?" Yuna looked at her with gentle eyes. "We do hear it. We just learned to keep moving anyway." "But how? How do you live with such pain?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Mireille's trembling hands in her own. "On Earth, we have a saying. Pain is not the enemy. Giving up is the enemy. Pain tells you that you are still alive. It tells you that something matters enough to hurt. The moment you stop feeling pain, you stop being human." Mireille did not understand. How could pain be anything but suffering? How could these creatures embrace something so terrible? But she noticed that Yuna's hands were warm, steady, strong, and somehow that warmth spread into her own cold fingers. "You are very strange," Mireille whispered. Yuna smiled. "We know." Across the palace, Commander Taiwu stood in the main courtyard, giving orders to his team. The Serati guards watched him with a mixture of doubt and curiosity. This human was not like their own commanders. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He spoke quietly, and his soldiers listened carefully to every word. "Junsu, take position on the north tower. Cover the main approach. Wujane, you are with me at the gates. Everyone else, spread out along the wall. Keep your communication channels open. If one position falls, we collapse to the center and make our stand there." A young soldier named Wujin raised his hand. He was the youngest member of the team, barely 20 years old. His face still had the softness of youth, but his eyes were hard. "Commander, what if they break through all positions?" Taiwu looked at him steadily. "Then we make them pay for every step. We buy time. We save as many lives as we can. That is our mission." Jin nodded. He did not ask what would happen to them. He already knew the answer. Keth approached Taiwu, his silver robes dusty and torn. The advisor had spent his whole life in politics, in comfortable rooms where wars were fought with words. Now, he stood in a courtyard preparing for real battle, and he looked lost. "I must ask you something," Keth said. "I have studied your species. Humans live for less than 100 years. Some of you barely reach 80. You are one of the shortest-lived intelligent species in the galaxy, and yet you throw yourselves into danger without hesitation. Why do you not value your brief lives more?" Taiwu stopped what he was doing. He turned to face the Serati advisor and spoke in a voice that was calm but heavy with meaning. "Because our lives are brief, we value them more than you can imagine. Every day matters. Every choice matters. Every moment we spend breathing is a gift that will soon be taken away." He paused. "That is why we fight. Not because we do not fear death, but because we fear wasting the time we have." Oh, Keth stared at him. In 300 years of service to the Queen, he had never heard such words. The Serati lived for thousands of years. They had time to wait, time to think, time to be careful. They never rushed into anything, but perhaps that was why they had grown weak. They had so much time that they forgot how precious it was. They had become slow, careful, afraid of losing what they had. Humans had nothing to lose. Every day was already borrowed time. And that made them fearless in a way the Serati could never be. "I think I understand now," Keth said slowly. "You are not brave because you are strong. You are brave because you are dying." "We're all dying," Taiwu replied. "We just know it better than most." The ground shook. A distant explosion lit up the sky. The hollow were getting closer. Taiwu turned to his team. "Everyone to positions. It starts now." The humans spread out across the palace, taking their places on the walls and in the corridors. They checked their weapons one last time. They shared quiet words, with each other's jokes, memories, promises. Doan found Yuna near the Eastern Hall. She was helping Mireille organize the civilians for evacuation. When she saw him, she walked over and stood beside him. "This might be it," she said softly. Doan nodded. "Probably any regrets?" He thought about it for a moment. "I wish I had eaten more of my mother's cooking. I always said I would visit her more. Never did." Yuna laughed quietly. "When we get back, I will make sure you do. Is that a promise?" "It is." They stood together in silence, watching the fires grow closer in the distance. Two soldiers who had fought side by side for 10 years. Two humans who had crossed the stars to stand in a palace that was not their own, to defend people who had never shown them kindness. They were afraid. Of course they were afraid. Only fools felt no fear in the face of death. But fear was not the same as surrender. Fear was just another enemy to fight, and humans had been fighting enemy since the beginning of time. The first wave of hollow appeared on the horizon. Thousands of pale figures moving across the burning land like a white flood. Their empty eyes reflected no light. Their mouths hung open in silent screams. They had no thoughts, no feelings, no mercy. They only had hunger. Duhan raised his rifle and took aim. "Here they come," he said, and the battle began. The hollow came like a river of death. They poured over the hills and through the burning streets. Thousands of pale bodies moving as one, driven by a hunger that never stopped. Their skin was white as bone. Their eyes were empty holes that saw nothing but prey. They made no sound except for the endless scraping of their claws against stone and metal. The Sarati guards on the outer wall fired their energy weapons. Beams of bright light cut through the darkness, burning holes in the advancing horde. Dozens of hollow fell. Then hundreds. But for every one that died, 10 more took its place. The wave did not slow. It did not stop. It just kept coming. "Fall back," one of the guards screamed. "Fall back to the palace." The psychic shields that protected the wall flickered and died. Without their mental powers, the Sarati soldiers were lost. They had never trained for this kind of fight. They had never needed to. Their weapons felt strange in their hands. Their bodies were not built for war. They ran. The hollow reached the wall and began to climb. Their claws dug into the ancient stone like knives into soft bread. They moved fast, faster than anything that size should move. Within seconds, they were over the wall and pouring to the palace grounds, and then they met the humans. Doan stood at the eastern gate with 4 other soldiers. His rifle barked fire into the darkness. Each shot found its target. Each target fell, but there were too many. Always too many. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Do not let them reach the civilians." The other soldiers obeyed without question. They had trained for this. They had fought in wars across the galaxy. They knew how to stand when everything inside them screamed to run. A hollow broke through the formation and leaped toward Doan. Its claws reached for his throat. He dropped his rifle and caught the creature in midair. They crashed to the ground together, rolling across the stone courtyard. The hollow was strong. Its muscles were like steel cables. Its jaws snapped inches from Dohan's face. But Doan had grown up on Earth, where humans fought for survival every single day. He had learned to wrestle before he could read. He had broken bones and been broken in return. Pain was an old friend. He twisted his body and slammed his elbow into the hollow's skull. Once, twice, 3 times. The creature's head cracked like an egg. It went limp. Doan pushed the body aside and grabbed his rifle. His hands were covered in black blood. His armor was torn, but he was still standing. "Is that all you have?" he growled. On the North Tower, Junsu held his position with 2 other soldiers. He was the team's best sniper, prescient, precise, deadly. His rifle spat fire across the battlefield, and every shot was a kill. But even he could see that they were losing ground. "Commander," he spoke into his communicator. "They are breaking through the western corridor. We need support." Taiwu's voice came back, calm and steady. "Support is on the way. Hold your position. Buy us time." How much time? As much as you can, Junsu nodded to himself. He loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle and kept firing. That was the human way. You fought until you could not fight anymore. Then you found a way to fight a little longer. In the Eastern Hall, Yuna worked frantically to save lives. Sarati civilians had been caught in the first attack. Some were missing limbs. Others had deep claw marks across their bodies. Their silver blood pooled on the white floor. Murray helped her, following instructions without understanding half of them. Human medicine was different from Sarati healing. It was rough, violent, invasive. Yuna cut open wounds to clean them. She burned flesh to stop bleeding. She pushed needles into veins and poured strange liquids into bodies. "This is barbaric," Murray whispered. "This is survival," Yuna replied. "Beauty can wait. Living comes first." A hollow crashed through the window behind them. It landed on all fours, its empty eyes scanning the room full of wounded civilians. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Yuna did not hesitate. She pulled her pistol from her belt and fired 3 shots into the creature's chest. It staggered. She fired 3 more into its head. It fell. She turned back to her patient without missing a beat. Her hands, still red with blood, continued their work. Murray stared at her. This small human female, who spoke softly and smiled gently, had just killed a monster without blinking. How could someone hold such violence and such compassion in the same heart? "How do you do it?" Murray asked. "How do you heal with one hand and kill with the other?" Yuna looked at her, and for a moment her eyes showed something deep and old. Because both are necessary. Sometimes you save lives by giving medicine. Sometimes you save lives by taking them. The only thing that matters is that you save them. Outside, Commander Taiwu led a counterattack against the creatures breaking through the western wall. He fought with a blade in one hand and a pistol in the other. His movements were smooth, practiced, deadly. Every strike was efficient. Every shot was precise. The Sarati guards watched in disbelief. This human moved like water flowing around stones. He did not waste energy. He did not panic. He simply killed everything in his path and moved forward. "Push them back," Taiwu ordered. "Give the civilians time to reach the ships." His soldiers obeyed. They pushed forward through the tide of hollow, carving a path with blood and fire. 4 of them fell. Then 6. Each one died fighting, taking dozens of enemies with them. By the time the sun rose, the first wave was over. The palace grounds were covered in bodies, mostly hollow, but some human and Sarati as well. The white stone was stained black and silver with blood. Smoke rose from a dozen fires. The air smelled of death. 8 humans remained standing. Taiwu gathered his team in the main courtyard. They were exhausted, wounded, barely able to stand. But they were alive, and the civilians were safe. Queen Velith came down from her tower to meet them. She walked through the battlefield, her silver robes trailing through the blood. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted by the screams that still echoed in her mind. She stopped in front of Taiwu and looked at him for a long moment. "I watched everything," she said. "I saw your soldiers fight. I saw them fall. I saw them laugh and shout and bleed." Her voice trembled. "In 10,000 years, I have never seen anything like it. How did you hold against so many?" Taiwu wiped the blood from his face. "We did not hold, Your Majesty. We just refused to fall." Velith looked at the surviving humans. 8 soldiers standing in the ruins of her palace, surrounded by the bodies of their enemies. They should have been broken. They should have been terrified. But their eyes still burned with that strange fire she could not name. "What happens now?" she asked. Taiwu looked toward the horizon. More hollow were coming. The second wave was gathering in the distance. And this time, they would not stop until everything was dead. "Hey, now we rest," he said. "Then we fight again." Velith nodded slowly. She did not understand these humans. She did not know if she ever would, but she knew. One thing for certain, they were not going to run, and neither would she. The second wave would come at nightfall, Every sensor in the palace confirmed it. The hollow were gathering beyond the mountains, their numbers growing by the hour. This time, there would be no stopping them. This time, the wave would be final. Queen Velith stood alone in her private chamber. The room had once been beautiful, filled with ancient paintings and sculptures that told the story of her people. Now the windows were cracked, the walls were scorched, and dust covered everything like a funeral shroud. She thought about her empire. 10,000 years of history, art, science, and philosophy. 10,000 years of building something that was supposed to last forever, and now it was ending. Not with a grand battle between equals, but with a swarm of mindless creatures that could not even understand what they were destroying. There was a knock at her door. "Enter," she said. The door opened and Doan walked in. His armor was damaged beyond repair. His face was covered in cuts and bruises. Dried blood, black and silver mixed together, covered his hands and arms. He looked like he had crawled out of a nightmare, but his eyes were clear, calm, alive. "Your Majesty," he said. "Commander Taiwu sent me to give you a report. The evacuation ships are almost ready. Your people will be safe within the hour." Velith nodded slowly. "And after that?" "After that, we hold the palace until you are clear. Then we destroy the core and seal the hollow inside. You will die." Dohan did not look away. "Probably." Velith studied him for a long moment. She had lived for over 300 years. She had met countless species, countless leaders, countless warriors, but she had never met anyone like this human standing before her. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair near the window. Doan hesitated, added, "I want to understand something before the end." Doan walked over and sat down. He moved carefully, like every muscle in his body was in pain, which, Velith realized, was probably true. She sat across from him and looked into his eyes. She tried again to read his mind, to find the source of that burning light inside him. But all she found was chaos, memories, feelings, thoughts, all tangled together like a storm. It was beautiful in a strange way, wild and uncontrolled, but full of life. "I have a question," Velith said. "I have been thinking about it since you arrived, and I need to know the answer before I can leave this place in peace." Doan waited. "What is it?" Velith asked. "That thing inside you that I cannot name? Your species is young. Your bodies are fragile. You live for such a short time, barely a heartbeat compared to us. You have no psychic powers, no special abilities, nothing that should make you strong." She leaned forward. "And yet you fight like gods. You laugh in the face of death. You throw yourselves into battles you cannot win, and somehow you keep standing. Why? What is that fire burning inside you?" Doan was silent for a long time. He looked out the cracked window at the burning sky, thinking about her question. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy with meaning. "It is because we know we are going to die." Velith frowned. "Everyone dies eventually. Even my people, long-lived as we are, will one day face our end." "But you forget," Doan said. "You live for thousands of years. You have so much time that death becomes something far away, something that happens to other people, something you can ignore." He turned to look at her. "We cannot ignore it. From the moment we are born, we know. We feel it in our bones. Every breath, every heartbeat brings us closer to the end. We are always dying." Velith felt something cold in her chest. "That sounds like a curse, maybe, but it is also a gift." Doan leaned back in his chair. "Because we know our time is short, we learn to use it. We do not wait for tomorrow, because tomorrow might never come. We love hard, fight hard, live hard. Every moment matters. Every choice matters. Every person we meet, every sunset we watch, every meal we share, it all matters because it might be our last." He paused. "Your people have forgotten what it means to be mortal. You have so much time that you stopped caring about any single moment. You became careful, patient, afraid of losing what you had. But we have nothing to lose. Every day is already borrowed time, so we spend it freely, without fear." Velith listened in silence. The words struck her like physical blows. She thought about her own life, the centuries spent in meetings and ceremonies, the years wasted on politics and tradition. She had so much time that she had learned to waste it. She had become slow, cautious, afraid. These humans had less than 100 years, and they burned through every single one like a star-going supernova. "You are not primitive," she whispered. "You are free." Doan smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and it changed his whole face. He looked younger, softer, almost peaceful. "You try to be," he said. "It is not easy. Fear is always there, whispering in our ears, telling us to hide, to run, to give up. But we learn to walk with fear instead of running from it. We learn to carry it on our shoulders and keep moving forward anyway." Velith stood up and walked to the window. The second wave was visible now, dark lines stretching across the horizon, millions of hollow waiting for nightfall, waiting to consume everything she had ever loved. "I am afraid," she said quietly. "I have never admitted that to anyone before, but I am terrified. Of being forgotten, of leaving nothing behind." Doan rose and stood beside her. "Good, that means you are still alive." She looked at him. "How do you face it?" "The fear? I do not face it alone." He pointed down at the courtyard, where the remaining human soldiers were preparing for the final battle. "I face it with them. With my brothers and sisters who fight beside me, with the people I love. That is the secret, Your Majesty. We are not strong because we have no fear. We are strong because we share our fear with each other. Together, no burden is too heavy to carry." Velith watched the humans below. They were laughing, sharing food, checking each other's wounds. In a few hours, most of them would be dead. And yet they acted like they had all the time in the world, because to them, every moment was all the time in the world. "I envy you," Velith said. "I have lived for 300 years, and I have never truly lived. Not the way you do." "It is not too late," Doan replied. "You still have time. Not much, maybe, but enough." The Queen of the Sarati Empire looked at the human warrior standing beside her. This scarred, bleeding creature who had crossed the stars to die for strangers. This man who carried fear in his heart and fire in his eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Doan nodded. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Velith asked. He looked back at her one last time. "While I still can." He walked out into the courtyard, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts and the burning sky. Outside, the darkness grew deeper. The final wave was coming, and somewhere in the ruins of a dying empire, 8 humans prepared to teach the galaxy what it truly meant to be alive. The final wave came with the setting sun. The Hollow Queen led them herself. She was massive, 10 times larger than her children, with a body that seemed to be made of darkness and hunger. She floated above her army like a storm cloud, and where her shadow fell, nothing survived. Queen Velith watched from the last evacuation ship as it rose into the sky. Her people filled the vessels around her, thousands of Sarati, who had survived because 12 humans had crossed the stars to save them. Marae stood beside her, tears running down her silver cheeks. "We should stay," Marae whispered. "We should fight with them." Velith shook her head. "They asked us to live. That is how we honor them." Below, in the ruins of the palace, 4 humans remained. Doan Yuna, Taiwu, Wujin. The others had fallen during the second wave. Buying time for the evacuation, they had died with weapons in their hands and smiles on their faces. They had died as humans, fighting, laughing, refusing to give up. Now, only 4 were left, and they had one final mission. The palace core was a sphere of pure energy hidden deep beneath the throne room. It had powered the building for 8,000 years. If it was destroyed, the explosion would be enough to collapse the palace and trap the Hollow Queen inside. But someone had to stay behind to trigger it. They stood together in the core chamber, their backs to the glowing sphere. Outside, the Hollow were breaking through the last defenses. The walls shook with their hunger. "Any last words?" Taiwu asked. Wujin laughed nervously. He was still so young, his face still holding traces of the boy he had been before the war. I never got to tell my mother I loved her. Always thought there would be time. She knows, Una said gently. Mothers always know. Doan checked his weapon one last time. His rifle was almost empty. His blade was cracked. His body was covered in wounds that would kill a normal man. But he was still standing. He would stand until he could not stand anymore. I want to be buried on Earth, he said quietly. Under a tree, somewhere quiet. Una took his hand. Her fingers were cold and covered in dried blood. I will make sure of it. He looked at her. You were coming with me, you know? Same tree. She smiled through her exhaustion. I would not have it any other way. The chamber doors began to crack. The hollow were coming. Taiwu turned to his team one final time. These were his soldiers, his friends, his family. They had followed him across the galaxy without question. They had trusted him with their lives. And now they would die together. It has been an honor, he said. The honor was ours, Commander Wujin replied. The doors exploded inward. Thousands of hollow poured into the chamber, their empty eyes fixed on the four humans standing in front of the core. Behind them, floating like a nightmare made real, came the Hollow Queen. She was ancient, hungry, endless. Her mind was a void that swallowed everything it touched. She had consumed entire civilizations. She had eaten stars. And now, she would eat these last four insects who dared to stand against her. She reached toward them with 1,000 shadowy tendrils. Taiwu raised his blade. Now, the humans attacked. They moved like a single creature, each one covering the others, each strike flowing into the next. Wujin fired his last rounds into the advancing horde. Una cut down anything that got too close. Doan waded into the enemy like a force of nature. His blade singing through the air, and Taiwu faced the queen alone. She was enormous. Her tendrils were faster than light. Her power was beyond anything he had ever faced. But he did not hesitate. He charged forward, dodging her attacks, cutting through her darkness, climbing up her massive body like a man climbing a mountain. She screamed the first sound she had ever made. It was a sound of surprise, of confusion, of something that might have been fear. This tiny creature was hurting her. This fragile being was actually hurting her. What are you? She hissed. Taiwu looked into her endless eyes. Blood ran down his face. His body was broken, but his voice was strong. I am human, and you are done. He drove his blade into her core. The queen howled. Her body began to crack. Light poured from the wounds, burning away the darkness below. The others had fallen back to the core controls. Wujin was down, his leg torn by claws. Una held him, trying to stop the bleeding. Doan stood over them both, fighting off the last of the hollow with nothing but his broken blade in his fists. Do it, Taiwu shouted from above. Trigger the core. Doan looked at the controls. The sequence was simple. One button. One explosion. One final act. He looked at Una. She looked back at him. Together, she said. Together, he replied. He reached out and pressed the button. The core began to glow brighter. Energy built inside it, spiraling faster and faster. The walls started to crack. The ground shook. Taiwu fell from the dying queen and landed beside his team. He crawled over to them, his body barely responding. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. They held each other as the light grew blinding. For humans in a chamber of pure energy, surrounded by the bodies of their enemies, for soldiers who had crossed the stars to save strangers, the explosion was visible from orbit. Queen. Velith watched as the palace collapsed in a sphere of white fire. The shockwave spread across the land, consuming everything in its path. The Hollow Army vanished in an instant. The Hollow Queen's scream echoed across the psychic network and then went silent forever. Myray fell to her knees, sobbing. The other Serati stood in stunned silence, watching the destruction below. They had been saved. Their people would survive. A new Serath would rise from the ashes, but the price had been paid by someone else. 1 year later, On the planet New Sarath, Queen Velith unveiled a monument. It stood in the center of the new Capitola statue carved from white stone that glowed softly in the light of twin moons. It showed a human soldier standing, lone against a tide of darkness. His blade was raised. His face was calm. Behind him, barely visible in the stone, were three other figures standing shoulder to shoulder at the base of the statue. An inscription was carved in both Sarati script and human language. They knew they would die. They came anyway. This is what it means to be human. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Every species heard about the 12 humans who had held a palace against millions. Every child learned the names of the 4 who had sacrificed everything to stop the Hollow Queen. Humans were no longer seen as primitive or weak. They were seen as something else. Something that the galaxy had forgotten could exist. They were seen as brave. On Earth, in a small garden outside the city of Sol, Doan's mother received a message from a queen she had never met. Attached to it was a medal made from Sarati crystal. It's the highest honor their empire could give. The message read, "Your son taught an ancient people what it means to truly live. He showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. We will never forget him. We will never let the fire die, with eternal gratitude." Queen Velith of New Sarath, Doan's mother held the medal to her heart and looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond the stars, her son had become a legend, and on a distant world. Under a statue of white stone, a flame burned eternally. A human flame. A reminder to everyone who saw it that even in the darkest night, there would always be those who refused to give up. Those who stood when others ran. Those who fought when others surrendered. Those who were human.